Sendai, the largest city in the Tohoku region, is known as the City of Trees. At the ruins of Sendai Castle on Aba Hill, where one can overlook the city, the first lord of the Sendai domain, Date Masamune, a famed warlord of the Sengoku period, still watches over the town. In this historic land, there is a craft that uses a rare material. Sendai Omoregi Zaziku, Sendai Buried Woodwork. It is characterized by its beautiful dark brown wood grain and moderate weight, and boasts a history of around 200 years. In the mountain village, a little away from the city center, lies the Akiu Kogei no Sato, Akiu Craft Village. Here, you can find the workshop of Takashi Kodake, the only craftsman of Sendai Buried Woodwork. Mr. Kodake started in this craft at 15 and has been a craftsman for 57 years. He specializes in trendy animal motifs. A young person is undergoing training under Mr. Kodake. Omoregi craftsman, Ayano Suzuki.
ここに初めて来て埋もれ木を少し削らせてもらってこれだって思ったんですよね、はい、心躍るというか、
Suzuki, born in Sendai in 1989, has loved making things since she was a child. At the university she attended, she majored in Japanese literature, but was fascinated by the material of Omogi, Bogwood, and Mr. Kodake's works, and chose this path.
埋もれ木っていうのは500万年前に地中に埋もれた樹木なんです。
Bogwood is made from trees buried underground, around the same time humanity first appeared. The origins of Omogisaiku date back to the late Edo period in 1822, when a lower-ranking samurai, who was responsible for guarding Sendai Castle, discovered buried wood by chance. Kodake made vessels from it. Later, from the Meiji to Taisho eras, it developed into a popular everyday item for the common people, and the number of craftsmen exceeded 130. However, since the 1950s, the number of craftsmen has steadily declined, until Mr. Kodake became the last one. Mr. Kodake showed us the Omogi, Bogwood, storage area.
ここにあるのが埋もれ木の材料なんですけど、なくなるとそれでおしまいなんです。
In fact, all of the Bogwood belongs to Mr. Kodake. What should be done to use this material more effectively? Mr. Kodake, after much deliberation, reached a conclusion.
これから量より質で勝負しようと思って美術工芸品の方に力を入れるようになったわけです。
Mr. Kodake joined the Miyagi Prefecture Art Association, learned about fine arts and crafts, and won numerous awards for his works. In 1982, Omogizaiku was designated as a traditional craft of the prefecture, elevating what was once a common household item to fine art. Furthermore, Mr. Kodake's efforts also resulted in preserving enough material for the next 50 years, and in November 2012, he took on his first apprentice.
師匠は職人の腕が素晴らしいので、途絶えさせたらもったいないと思うので。
私がね、こうやって元気で仕事にする限りは精一杯ね指導したり、少しでもね自分のレベルまで達してくれるまで頑張ってもらえれば。
After this, Ms. Suzuki begins working on her own piece. It's been almost 4 years since Ayano Suzuki became Mr. Kodake's apprentice, having grown to the point Where she can create original works, Ms. Suzuki begins working on a spoon at her master's request.
スプーンなんていうものはもうどなたでもみんな分かっていることであり手に取っているものですけど、単純なものほど難しいんです。木が硬いから、私でさえもねやっぱりちょっとブレる時あるから、左右がね。
Though the shape of a spoon may seem simple at first glance, the handle is lightly curved for ease of use, with varying thickness. This feature, known as miyabi, elegance, is one of the characteristics of omogazaiku. It's the natural art, born over many long years. The traditional technique involves leaving part of the natural wood grain visible. How the miyabi is left can greatly affect the piece's outcome. First, the critical step that determines the quality of the work, choosing the wood.
木の色が茶色っぽいものほど良くて、黒っぽいやつはあんまり良くない。色が全然違うの分かると思いますけど、茶色っぽい色してるやつは炭化が進んでないんですよ。
Carbonization is when the wood is heated without oxygen, turning it into charcoal. The more carbonized the wood, the blacker and harder it becomes, making it more difficult to work with. What, exactly, is buried wood?
この埋もれ木っていうのはそのアタンの副産物として出たんです。
There is a place where you can see this rare atan. Atan is a type of coal formed when trees buried underground become carbonized. So, what is the relationship between atan and buried wood? We asked an expert who has been researching the geology of the prefecture for 60 years.
アタンの中に、たまたま含まれていたということなので、だからアタンの出来方と、同じなんですが、木質アタンって言われているのはその埋もれ木ですから。
Both atan and buried wood originally came from trees that grew on the surface. When they fell and were buried underground, most of them turned into atan in about 5 million years, but the trees that became buried wood were giant sequoias, so the carbonization process was slower, leaving some of the wood structure intact. In other words, if the carbonization of buried wood progresses, it becomes atan. Miyagi Prefecture is one of Japan's leading producers of atan, and it was primarily used as fuel for homes, such as in stoves and baths, but since the 1950s. With the advent of petroleum and electricity, mining ceased. As a result, buried wood also became unavailable. In the workshop, Suzuki has finished selecting the wood, and is moving on to the stage where he roughly carves the wood into the shape of a spoon, using various blades. First, she splits it into 3 using a hatchet. Each of these pieces will become 1 spoon. She switches from the hatchet to a chisel and begins to shave the edges, revealing the beautiful grain of the wood.
やっぱりとてもいい木だ。こういうのがいい木です。埋もれ木っていうのは化石で、やっぱり硬さが普通の木と全然違うので。
Having been buried underground for 5 million years, buried wood is half fossilized, while still retaining its wood grain, making it as hard as stone. Ms. Suzuki uses a mold to guide her blade as she carves the hard buried wood. Additionally, buried wood is heavier than wood that grows on the surface, because it is compressed by the sediment above it, making the grain denser. Compared to oak, the heaviest domestic wood in Japan, buried wood, is more than 100 grams heavier. She uses his entire body to carve the hard and heavy buried wood. Then, one side of the spoon's bowl-shaped part chipped off.
やっぱりこうやって木目がとっても綺麗なやつだとペキッといきやすいんです。
Fossilized buried wood, like stone, is also brittle and can break under external pressure. From here, she will shave the opposite side of the chipped part to balance it out. If the same mistake happens again, it won't take shape and the precious material will be wasted. She repeatedly checks the balance, shaping it into a symmetrical form.
Now, ここからやっぱり先に進むごとに難しくなっていきますね。ごまかしが効かなくなるので。
With the rough shape of the spoon complete, the next step is hollowing out, where she will finish it as if it were the final product. First, the handle of the spoon. Since applying too much force could break it, she carefully proceeds bit by bit.
この辺裏側なんですけど、この木目がこう出てくるのが綺麗で、私はこれが好きです。
The unique wood grain appears on the handle of the spoon. This is the main reason she is fascinated by buried wood. The handle is shaped with a rounded bulge on the front for ease of grip. On the back, she shaves it to create a slight curve.
どういう形だったら見ていて使っていて気持ちいいかなみたいなことをきちんと考えながらやっていきます。
Next, she begins to gradually carve out the bowl-shaped part of the spoon. She also shapes the back into a smooth, rounded form. The hollowing process is now complete. The grain on the handle part has also come out beautifully. The work now moves to the finishing stage. From here, she begins the polishing. She uses waterproof sandpaper. She works in 4 stages, starting with coarse grit and moving to finer grit. By wetting the surface while sanding, it's easier to sand without wood dust accumulating.
縁の太さがバラバラなんですよ。ここら辺細くてここら辺太くないですか？ここやっぱり整えたいですよね。
Upon close inspection, it is indeed not perfectly symmetrical. Polishing not only smooths the surface, but also serves as the final correction stage. After spending half a day on sharpening, she let it dry, for now. The sharpening is finished, and the spoon has been beautifully completed. It seems that the bowl-shaped part has also turned out well. From here, the process moves on to applying lacquer. Using a cotton cloth, she applied lacquer over the entire surface, using a method called wipe lacquer. Once the lacquer is applied, she places it in a humidity-controlled chamber and lets it dry for about 6 hours. Then, Ms. Suzuki stepped outside the workshop. She began taking photographs.
師匠が動物が好きで、亀とかの鳥とかそういう作品を作ってらっしゃるので、私は植物が好きなので、こうやって植物の写真とか撮って作品に活かせないかなと思って。
Suzuki finds plants that might be useful in Omogi, Bogwood Crafts, photographs them, and then creates works based on those models. She never wastes her free time, always using it to create new works. And Suzuki says, this is the time she loves more than anything else. Once the lacquer had dried, she sanded the surface using the finest sandpaper. This process is called lacquer painting, and after letting it dry, she applied lacquer 4 more times to complete the work. How will Mr. Suzuki's master evaluate her work as she enters his 4th year as a craftsman?
はい、完成しました。
でもこう見てちょっとここ出てるでしょ。見てみて。こういうところ注意した方がいいね。
はい。
The connection between the spoon's handle and the bowl is slightly uneven. The fact that this happened, despite my careful attention during sharpening, is frustrating.
材料がなくなっちゃったとしても、埋もれ木細工の技術は他の木で使えるので、その技術を絶やさないように努力していきたいなと思います。
Ms. Suzuki actively holds workshops to promote Sendai Bogwood Crafts, spreading its charm to a wider audience. She is passionate about sharing its beauty. Even if the materials run out, the traditional skills that have been passed down will never die out. Opening the door to tomorrow, she takes another step closer to her dream.